So welcome back to part 3 of understanding exposure. In this lesson, we're going to look at aperture and how we can control light as opposed to shutter speed. And this time we're going to look at 3 different glasses coming up next. Hello again and welcome back to Complete Communication Sweden. I'm Jesse. Let's get started on aperture. So in the previous videos, we looked at the idea of the glass moving, shutter speed, and how to capture water from the tap before closing the shutter speed again. This time round, we're looking at aperture, which is another way of controlling how much or how little light gets into the camera as required. So let's say you're in a situation where you can't change the time. That's when we get to aperture. So you've got your glass under your tap trying to capture the light coming from the tap. So instead of changing the shutter speed, another option we have is to change the aperture of the glass. So remember we talked about how putting the glass under the tap, waiting the right amount of time until it's full, and then taking away the glass from under the water, i.e. the light source. Another way of controlling the amount of light, therefore, instead of the timing, is aperture. And think of it like this. The size of your glass. How long would it take to put this glass under the tap for the water to fill up before you remove it? Now take this glass. Instead of this one, we make the aperture bigger. How long would it take to hold with this aperture to put under the water and fill it up? It wouldn't take as long as the other one. And how about this glass? How long would it take compared with that? Can change the aperture once again. So what we're doing with aperture is we're changing the size of the glass, which means that some aperture needs less time. Some aperture needs more time. So what we're doing with the aperture is changing the amount of time by changing the aperture. So what we're doing with aperture is we're making a choice of how big of a glass do I need to fill. This one needs less water to be full. This one needs more water. And we do that by changing the apertures on the glass. And in that way you can see that there's a big difference between a large aperture and a small aperture in terms of your choice as a photographer when it comes to achieving a great exposure to fill the glass. Of course, there are differences in why you would choose a small aperture one day or a big aperture. That's for another video. But the concept is, instead of doing the shutter speed timing, you can change the aperture. And as you can understand, no matter which way you do it, by putting the glass under the water, waiting for it to fill up and removing is shutter speed, or doing it this way, this will take a certain amount of time and we control how much exposure, but regardless, the result is still fill the glass. And it's really that simple. Aperture is like changing the size of your glass. It will still take a longer or shorter time, but that again depends on the amount of light. It's a different way of controlling the time required to fill your glass. And there we have it. That's how we understand aperture when it comes to exposure. And in the final part of this series, we're going to next look at ISO and how that might be applied to filling the glass when it comes to getting a decent exposure or not. All that, see you in the next video. Thanks for watching my channel. If you enjoyed the show and would like to see more in the series, don't forget to subscribe for more tips, tricks, secrets, and tutorials, as well as share with people you think might enjoy the content. See you in the next one.